So we're going to talk about a couple different modules that deal with web scraping. Let's just throw up idle here real quick. And we'll start up a new file. Let's split that. There we go. So if you look over here on the left, it's going to list a couple different modules that we're going to cover. We have web browser. Web browser is very easy to begin with. So over here, we just simply import web browser. And then with the web browser utility, we use web browser open, and then we just pass it a URL. So we could say something like https google.com. Right? And if we run this file, we can see that it has no web browser, right? What do we got to do? First of all, we got to spell it correctly. There we go. And so what it does is it finds whatever your system web browser is. So if you are in Windows, Linux, Mac, whatever you set as your default browser, it will automatically open up, in this case, a new tab and go out to google.com. All right. So if we come out here and go to, say, fhsu.edu/informatics, and we run this, it will automatically open a page out to the informatics page. So it seems pretty basic, but you can think about this in maybe your main menu of your project or something. You want to send them to a URL. You could build that into your code. They hit number 4. It opens up a tab and goes back to the main menu. It might be nice to send additional information. So say, you've gone out to some websites and they have extra stuff at the end of the URL, right? So I went to informatics or I went to somewhere else. You could build that URL on the back end in Python. Basically, this would become something like URL equals, and then we could set this. And then inside here, we would just use URL. And then we could build this string into whatever we wanted it to be. So sometimes, like if you go to a username, for example, on some websites, you have to ask the user what their username is, and then you can attach it to the end of this URL so that it goes to that person's profile page or something like that to that degree. All right. So web browser is how you interact with opening a web browser to a specific URL. We also have what's called the request module. Now, the request module is used to download files. It's also used to download web pages from the internet itself. So this way we can go through a few things and kind of bring it all out, right? So if we look at this map it example they have here, which is going back to web browser itself, what they're actually doing is building a URL based off the address. So in this case, they called it map it, and then you pass it a address, a street address, and it will automatically build out the URL based on something like that, right? We can ignore that section. We're not going to go through that. What we will handle is that's another thing, right? So you could do something like import paperclip. And instead of opening it out to the browser, you could also send that URL to the clipboard, right? And then they can copy and paste it into the browser of their choice. Example. There's a couple modules. Requests is one that's pretty popular that we need to do. Requests we actually have to install. So you would have to come out here to your CMD prompt and do a pip install requests. And in this case, you can see it's already installed. And then from there, we can import requests. So import requests. And then from requests, we can do a couple different items. So I'm just going to remove the ones from before. And the first one that we want to do is a get. So if you guys remember a little bit, hopefully you've taken the web design class 250, and you guys know a little bit about get and post, maybe a little bit of that, right? So if I go out to a website, right, and I say I want to go to fhsu.edu, I am doing a get for information from that website, right? So that is a get from the server. I'm getting it from the server. We can also do things like post, and post would be something like if we filled out a form on a website and hit submit, that is a post. We're posting information to the server. The server then manipulates that information and sends us back something, whatever it may be. It may say a thank you. It may take your information and generate a page based off your information. All right, simple get and post. So in this case, we want to get, and for example, we want to download this file here. So if we go to this file in a normal web browser, and this is rj.txt, we can see that we have Romeo and Juliet, right? And it's just a text file with the entire book that is out here, okay? If we want to pull down that from the website using Python, we would import requests, and we'd say something like res equals request.get, and then we want to get that specific URL. So we're just going to paste that in here. Okay. Now that we have stored that as a res object, okay, and this is just a response. You can call it whatever you want, doesn't matter. You have a question, Norm?
Is it all res? It's all
requests. Plural. Okay, so res, again, this is just a name that we're calling it here. We could call it response if we wanted to. Res is just short for response. So if we look at this and we did something like type res, it would tell us that this is a request module response. It's an object that comes back. So with the response, we have things called status codes. All right. So if we have res underscore status code, and if that equals requests dot codes dot okay, which is simply saying whether or not this response is valid or not. So maybe we had a typo in our URL. If you guys know anything about web server stuff, which you would in that class, if you haven't taken it, then you don't understand it. But in that class, you would learn that status codes depend on what you're getting from a website. So if I go out to a web browser and I ask for a website and it's valid, it is going to respond a 200 back to me. Okay. If I go to a URL that doesn't exist, I'm going to get typically a what? Anybody know that one? 404, right? So if I go out to this web browser and I type this in, I hit enter, I will actually get a 200, and we can test that if we come out here and inspect and go to our network. We come out here and refresh, you can see status code 200, and that just means that that was okay. Everything was good to go. If we go out to something that has a typo, so I'm just going to delete some letters out of here and hit enter, you're going to see I got a failed message come back here, right? And this failed is actually a 404. Okay. I don't know why it puts failed there. It should be saying 404. If you actually spread it out, it might tell you that, but it should be a 404. So what we're doing here is we have requests.codes.okay is actually the number 200. And so we're checking to make sure the status code matches this 200 as an okay status. The reason that we're using codes okay is it's much easier to remember okay than status code 200, status code 404, status code 300 and whatever 2, which is a redirect. A couple of those, right? Not everybody memorizes that stuff, just goofy, weird people with a beard. All right. When we look over here, there's a couple different things we can look at. If we did a len of the text that came back, so a len of the res.text, we would get back a number, which is the entire length of that text, and it would be number in bytes that would come in there. All right. And if we just wanted, say, the first 250 lines of that text, or 250 characters rather, we could say a 250 in here. And that will, if you guys remember from lists, it will just give us back the first 250 characters that comes out. Okay. So if we did the len of this, which we know we get back, we can change this to a simple print. And if we run this, it's going to get us back the first 250 characters out of that text file. All right. Now, the text file is kind of boring, right? We don't really care about Romeo and Juliet, but there's maybe something that you wanted to download from the internet, do some dissection of that particular text file, or maybe a PDF file, etc. Analyze it, pull it in, use it in your PDF or in your Python project. Yeah. So wget is a program in Linux that allows you to go retrieve files. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So in Python, we call requests, but in Linux, you could use wget. Yep, same concept as what you're talking about there. All right. So we have that. We could also look at this code here where they try to go get this page. We can try to raise for a status. And if there is a good status, great. If not, we're going to say there's some kind of problem. And this allows us to use that try and accept as an exception there. Okay. We could go ahead and save this file, right? So we've downloaded it and it's our res. If we wanted to open a file and save it, we could say something like play file equals open, and then we give it a name of a file. So we could say Romeo.txt. And because what we get back is in binary chunks, we actually need to write out as binary. So it's WB as opposed to just W. All right. Once we get that, we can then say for chunk out of that text that we had before. So for chunk in res.iter content. And what iter content does is just break down the first. In this case, we're going to do what, 100,000? Yeah. This is our chunk size. And then we're just going to write to that file. So play file dot write, and we're going to write that chunk out. Okay. And then at the end of this, we could do something like play file dot close. And if we run this, it would do nothing on this side, but if we go and actually look at this directory, if I bring this up in a file here, and we come into Python 3.11, and we should see a Romeo.txt, and if we go look at that text file, we could see the first 100,000 chunks that got written out of there. Okay. So it basically saved that to a text file for us. Now, obviously, we can use a web browser to do this, but if we do it in Python, we can automate a lot of things. Say you had to download 20 text files, or even worse, you had to download 1,000 text files, analyze those text files, and read that book or do something like that, right? Now we can code Python to go through each one of those text files for us, save those files down. Maybe we could then pass it to do further information off of that. All right. There's other times that we may want to pull text out of a basic HTML page, right? And so there again, if you guys had taken 250, you would know basic HTML tags. And those basic HTML tags, which you guys are all taking next semester, right? You guys are all enrolled in 250 next semester. So you guys, this will make more sense to you after you've taken 250. Yeah, web development class. Yep. And if you're not in 250 in the spring, those of you who are in this physical classroom, you should be. So if not, find me, because you're supposed to be. All right. So what would be nice is if we go out to certain websites, say like this weather.gov website, and maybe we want to extract some text off a certain place here. So if we go in here and we found the Salina, for example, and we want to extract this information of humidity, wind speed, parameter information, etc. So to get this information, if we right click and inspect, we can see that these all have different headers and tables, right? And so this one here is called panel body, and the idea is current conditions body. So inside that current conditions body, we can get a summary over here on the left. We can get details of that, and we want to extract that information out. We have to go find those IDs up here at the top, so that we can then tell Python to pull that content out for us. All right. I'm going to go back here. And if we look at this over on this side, we would download this HTML page. So we need to go to weather.gov. So let's go back to that link. We're going to go here, tab. Let's drag this over here so you guys can see it. And let's go back to see if we can pull haze over here. There we go. Weather for haze, and evidently we have a hazardous weather outlook. I don't know what that is. What do we have for hazardous weather? Widespread fog this morning. Well, we obviously all saw that. So if we come out here, we can see our current temperature that's out here and our humidity, etc. And if we look up here at the top, we have this really long URL, right? So if we want to download this URL, which specifies that we're going to here. We may do a request.get in order to pull that down, something like that. And then if we look at the res.text for this, and we would need to print that. See what that looks like. It's not a string. Sorry, didn't mean to call that something like that. You're going to get this really long line. Of course, it's squeezed down in text, right? So instead of displaying this and crashing my Python, let's just go ahead and grab the first 250 lines, or 250 characters rather. Like that. We can run this. Okay, and you can see the first 250 characters is the first part of this HTML file. So we're going to need more than 250 characters. Let's do the first 1,000. 250. Okay, and we start to get the HTML link sheets and everything that's in there. Well, what you're seeing here is if I go out to the browser and look at this page, wherever it went, find the right one, there we are. And if I right click and view page source, you're going to see this exact same text as it goes down. So if you guys aren't familiar with web pages, this is what web pages actually look like. It's a bunch of HTML code. And when this gets rendered into a browser, you actually see the actual website that looks like this. Okay. And you guys will all learn how to code this in 250 next semester. Okay. So what we want to do is just pull out some basic information out of here, and we can pull that out of that entire text. To do that, we need to use a package called Beautiful Soup. All right. So Beautiful Soup will interact with that HTML, because otherwise I got to search all the way through here for specific headers, and I got to find the right one in order to get down to the humidity percent and this miles per hour, etc. I'd have to search for that specific text. And does anybody know how we would search through that specific text for the time being of tools that we know in Python? Find all, which is part of the what module? Regex, right? So we would have to do some form of regex on this file in order to get through there. It's chaotic. All right. So instead of doing regex through there, we have a package called Beautiful Soup that actually builds out all these tags. And that way you can just search through the tags and pull that kind of text out. All right. So, and again, I'm just highlighting this. If you actually need to do this for your final project, you're going to want to go in much more detail of what's here. So we would import Beautiful Soup, and before we do that, we have to pip install it. So pip, whoops, not pip install there, CMD. We would do a pip install Beautiful Soup 4, Beautiful Soup 4. It's going to go through there, get all our package that we need. Great. Now, when we import this, this is one of those weird packages where we just call it BS4. All right. It's not Beautiful Soup 4. It's just BS4. Okay. Once we have BS4 installed, now we want to go through and pull some things. So if we look at this text here, it's going to import request some Beautiful Soup. We're going to go out to no starch. If that works, great. Then what we're going to do is use the text, and we're going to use an HTML parser on that. Okay. That just means, hey, that text is actually HTML, formatted like it would be HTML. So if I copy this out, and we're going to pretend it's this weather one for now, we're going to say weather equals Beautiful Soup, res.text, HTML parser. Okay. Now, this would also work if you downloaded an HTML file to your computer. Right? So if you downloaded a website to your machine, you could then parse through that as opposed to going to get it first. Then you would not require requests, right? Because you already have that file on your computer. Okay. So we have that, and now we have the ability to find a specific element, which is in that HTML code, with the select method. All right. So you could do something like, in our case, it'd be weather.select, and we would select based on a particular div. Well, if we look at our code for this particular one, we want to select a div that has the ID of current conditions detail, right? That gives us the humidity, the wind speed, the parameter, dew point, visibility, and the last time it was updated. So if we go by this ID, we can gather this information below it. So if we want a div ID, it'd be something like this. And if we pull up our project, oops, that guy there. We can now say soup, and instead of soup that we have here, right? Soup is just an example soup that's stored up here. This is a function that allows us to pull that in. So if we look at this example, we could say elements equal example soup.select, and we're going to select a hashtag author, right? And that gives us all the tags that are in author. Do we have an actual ID on our text? Let's see what that looks like. And we do. This is condition summary, right? Or detail. Let's do detail. So over here, we would have something like elms equals example. In this case, it's called weather dot select. And we want to select any tag that has conditions current detail or current conditions detail. Okay. And then for now, let's just print elms so we know what we got. There we go. And we can see we extracted that kind of information out of there, right? So now for each one of these TDs, we could extract this information and pull it out. But we got our overall div class. So now we would have to go through and see what else is in there in that part. So if we did something like for elms, and if we go back and look at our elms output, our elms output is in a what? That's a square bracket, which tells us elms is a list, right? And is there multiple items in this list, or is it just one item in here? Just one item. How did you determine that? There's no commas. Great point, right? We would normally see a bunch of this with a comma, something else if there was more than one. So when we want just the first result out of a list, what does that look like? In this case, it's called elms. So elms, what? We want to get the first index out of that list. 0, right? And we can confirm that if we just print this and run it. Now, when it prints the text, notice it's no longer in a list. We just have the text. We can pull it out. Okay. Okay, so we look through here, we could pull that out and we could say, get us the text for that first one. So dot get text. And what that will do is pull any of the text data that came out of that particular element. And in that case, we get the information we're looking for, right? And now if we formatted that and printed it, we could clean that up and actually put that in a little bit better. Or if we take that get text, maybe we know that that get text has what in it. Notice how this all kind of got put on the new lines, right? I just gave the answer away. So because this text actually wrapped around for each one of these, we could look for new line characters in that text, right? So if we looked at that in a way, we could then chop it on the new line characters, which then allows us to get a list of all those individual pieces so that we could format it the way we wanted it. Everybody kind of see how that works? So you could get text, you could select based on paragraphs, we could select based on a whole bunch of different attributes that we want in there, etc. Lots of different ways to do that. So what they're going to show you is a couple different projects that you can do with this. I encourage you to go through and play with some of those. So one example is this project here, right? And this project here is you go out to this website and you get a bunch of comics that come out of there. And it's a bunch of sarcastic math comments, etc., whatever comes out. It will have you write a tool that will load all of those. It will pull the URLs down and then spit it out on the web on a command line as to what you would get out of there and the pictures that would go through it. All right. So you can see it's downloading, it's going to the website, it's downloading the comic that goes through there and putting them all in a folder so that you can then load them up on your computer and watch. Right? It's one example. Maybe you don't want comics. A great example of this that a student used in a midterm and eventually into a final project is he wanted to build something that would go out to a favorite website of his. It was like Netflix. We'll just use Netflix as an example. But it was an underground version of Netflix that allows you to go out and watch a bunch of anime. And so he could go out and click on the website, watch an anime, but then he had to click and go to the next one in the session. Or if he wanted to go to the next episode in the series, he had to constantly click and do that over and over and over. What he wanted to do was build a channel, just like you go out to TV, and it would randomly start playing one of the episodes of one of the shows. Because normally you don't watch them back to back to back, right? If you're actually watching TV, it's an episode of this TV, whatever show it is, and then they go over to the next episode of another show, right? Standard TV format. So he wanted to build his own channel to do that. So what we did was we went out and grabbed all the URLs of all the different episodes of the shows he wanted. And then we created a randomizer that would automatically select one of those. It would open it in the web browser using the web browser command. And then from there, we would automate it further to actually click the play button so that he wouldn't have to touch it. And the idea was this would run on a little computer on a TV in his bedroom, and he just walk in and it would start playing all the anime he ever wanted. Right? Now, generic, but it was a cool project that he built in the end, and he did it in this class. So what we started with was simple request module to go out to that website, download all the episodes that showed up on that website. And I wish I could remember what it was, but there's tons of examples of those kind of websites out there. Once we got all the links for the different episodes, then we just used random int in order to randomly grab one because we put it in a list. And then from there, we would have to automate the play button, right? So we actually built it in a specialized web browser that we created so that it would automatically go full screen. And that way you would never see any of this happening. When it automatically clicked and did all this stuff, it just showed up and it automatically did it in the background. That is done with a module called Selenium. So everything you've done so far is use requests to pull a website. We use Beautiful Soup to analyze HTML code, and we use the web browser module to open a website itself. Selenium allows us to automate the web browser and clicks and fill out information or whatever we're doing. So say you were in a job that was required for you to input a bunch of information into a form on a website, but you have all that information in a Excel sheet. So you're having to read an Excel sheet, dump it into the web browser in the specific form, and then you submit it, right? You're some kind of data analyst or whatever you are. Well, instead of you having to do that by hand, we can analyze the Excel sheet, grab all the information, have it load the website for us, match up what these places are supposed to be, and Python fills it out for you. You hit go get a cup of coffee, maybe go down to Starbucks, get you some breakfast, whatever you're doing, come back, the project's done, and you got paid for hours worth of work. Pretty cool, right? I actually did this back in the old days. So I had to fill out a bunch of form information. We use something like Selenium to automate all this information for us. So when you guys are currently in like Internet Networking 1, right, and you do labs on NetLab, I had to create all those pods, and this is something that would take me all day to do. We wrote a Selenium app to do it. I hit go and I left for the day. Came back at the end of the day, all the pods were built, and the boss was impressed that I worked so hard that day. All right. That is what the power of these tools will allow you to do. So Selenium allows you to control a web browser. And once you get it set up, I'm not going to go through the example, but the idea is you can find certain elements on a screen, AKA we could find something like, say we go to google.com, right? And we want automated going in here and typing in this search. So we go to inspect on this, and we would want to find this element ID for adding the search, right? And it's just a search labeled box is what they called it. So we would tell it to find that particular object and then enter in whatever text we wanted. Then it would go over to the, or press enter for us, right? To do some kind of search. And we can tell Python to do every single step of that all the way through. So you have to set up a web browser, tell it a page and go, fill out forms, etc. Pretty cool. If you look at the practice project for this one, it's a game called 2048. All right. So if we look at this, and it's a game, and it turns out with this particular game, let me go back here, open this up in a new tab. All right. Some of you have played Cookie Clicker or something like that, right? Simple, silly game. My kid loves it because he sits there and clicks, and then now he's got an automatic clicker. I try to go use his or his laptop, and I can't do it because there's this automatic clicker that's clicking 1,000 times a second, so he can come back and have his quadrillion cookies when he's been gone for a couple days. All right, this game is very similar. In order to win, it turns out an effective pattern in this is if you go up, down, or I'm sorry, up, right, down, left, up, down, whatever I said there, up, right, down, left, right? And it turns out you just do this and you can get a really high score, right? Now, what you're supposed to be doing is calculating things and whatever else, but it turns out if you just do this, I can get a really high score, okay? So who wants to actually do this and sit here and click on their keyboard every single keystroke? Nah, we can use Selenium to send those commands to this website and just do it over and over and over in a very fast rate. Then you come back and you got the highest score that's possible. Simple game, but maybe you want to automate something doing that. All right. There's a couple other ones over here. Say you want to write a program that goes to Image or Flickr. In our case, it's what? What's today's Image website? Yes. Exactly what you're thinking it is. Instagram, right? So Instagram is today's version of Flickr and Imager that we had out there. But say you want to go to this website, it searches for a category of photos or maybe all your favorite celebrities and downloads all those resulting images so that you could do something with that, right? That is something that you could use with requests. You could use Selenium for that. And if you had to click a bunch of things in order to actually get there, you couldn't just go to a given URL. You could write Selenium to automatically go to those sites, then download all of those pages for you. Now, some of you in here, in theory, should be in cybersecurity, right? So one thing that we may want to do is use Selenium to go through every single page on a website, or in this case, we could just use the request module, go through every single page, and if we see something that looks like an email address, download it. Then we have a collection of all the email addresses on a website. Now we can do what? You guys get this all the time. We call it spam, but what would we do as cybersecurity professionals if we're auditing a company? Right? So say we're doing security awareness training. You guys had to do that here at Fort Hays, right? You get the bad email, you click on the link on the bad email, boom, you're capped, right? Tells you to log into Microsoft. You guys log into your Google Microsoft account, boom, they got your credentials. So we have to generate that email, which is something we'll actually do in cybersecurity. But you got to code it just right to make them think that it's real and that they click on the link and all of that, right? But we need a list of email addresses to send that to. Well, we can just go out to the Fort Hays State website, pull the directory, and get every single email address of everybody on campus. Now, it turns out it's password protected, but you could do this at a company because they typically don't password protect all of their email addresses. They want you to get that information so that you contact the people. So you could go out to, say, I don't know, Nextech. Right? We go out to nextech.com and we're going to troll every single page and grab any single email address that we could possibly find. Once we build up that database, now we code Python to create an email and then start blasting out emails of all that stuff we downloaded. So that's the kind of thing you would use these tools for. You could also go through and write a program that, given a URL, will attempt to download every single link that's on that page. And should it find any flags on a 404, it just prints them out as a broken link. There's lots of cool practice projects that you may actually use in real life. All right. Again, I'm not going to go into the weeds with those. Selenium takes a little bit more to set up. So if you plan to use that for your final project, just let me know and I can kind of walk a little bit more through with you on credentials. Yep. Aaron's got that one. So you could also use it to do OSINT type research. In other words, you want to do open source intelligence on a company before you do an audit. You go out to their website, pull anything and everything you can figure out about Sally. And that way we can determine how to code an email to send to Sally so she clicks on a link. So maybe we found out she did like 30 blog posts and her focus is artificial intelligence. We go, oh, hey, I saw your recent blog post on artificial intelligence. I'd really like you to come check out mine on the medium.com website. right? You throw up a URL, she's like, oh, okay, yeah, she's interested. That clicks on the link, boom, we got her. All right. So that's what Python can be used for. And there's tons of other things that we could use Python for. In the advanced class, we do some of these exact same things. So students have to use either an API or they got to go out to a website, scrape all the information they want, manipulate that data so that they can build some project that spits it back out. In our case, we don't just spread it out to the console screen. We actually build a website based off the information we scraped. So maybe we want to calculate the statistics of something off a certain website. We grab the information, do the statistical analysis, build a page that shows us all the stats. Sounds complicated. It's really not. It's no different than what you guys are doing for your midterm. It's just a little bit of different code. All right. Anybody got any questions on web scraping? Does anybody think they're going to use web scraping in their final project? It's okay if not. You don't know. Maybe you'll start playing with it and you want to play with it. Okay. Let's see. A chat came up. I'm wondering. Yeah, maybe. So yeah, Aaron, play with those. If you guys want to get better with them, see if you guys can manually create these practice projects. In other words, see if you can figure out a way to do these. But use the one that makes sense for what you're wanting to do, right? You could also do something like here is you get a notification. This could be something if you're sending messages on Facebook or Twitter, right? And you can use Twitter's API to pull that information or strings of text. All right. I'll stop this recording.